So I am here to introduce one of the graduate students in the MFA program, Karine Parker. Last semester she took my Women in the Visual Arts class, where our students studied a number of gender theories as they relate to art, art history and the art making practice. And so then at the end of that semester they were tasked with creating art in response to that. And so this is going to be talking about her creation. Thank you.
So good morning. First of all, thank you again for rescheduling my presentations. Very much appreciated. So as Dr. Ridlen just mentioned, during this special topic seminar, we examined and studied a selected group of women in the visual arts. We discussed many of the art historical trends through the lens of feminist theories, and also looked at different roles women have or had in the visual arts, such as being the subject of art, the inspiration behind it, the patrons, or even the artist. This class began with the historical analysis of the role of women in the arts from the 18th through the early 20th centuries, primarily in Europe, where roles of women started to change first. This led to discussing the contemporary gender debate and its impact on art and design. Some of the topics and categories we explored included feminism, agency, femininity, the male gaze, Orientalism, women as patrons, women as artists and designers, art education, LGBT issues, and several others. Towards the end of the semester, each student had to propose an art project that would explore and represent our reaction to a certain topic we connected most with through our readings and discussions. When exploring ideas for my project, I really connected to the theory of gender performance. American philosopher and theorist Judith Butler introduced the concept of viewing gender as a performance rather than an innate feature in her essay, Performative Acts and Gender Constitution, in 1988. In her theory, she described gender as something that was etched in our daily routines, learned and performed based on cultural norms as opposed to being directed by one's biological sex. Butler defined gender identity, as a performative accomplishment compelled by social sanction and taboo. We perform according to what society expects of us in order not to stand out from its prescribed norms. Some of the main influences which create our social expectations include what we watch on TV, or otherwise read in magazines, see on social media, or in advertisements. This series of posters highlight the classic male and female gender performances by using role reversal scenarios. The 1950s and 60s aesthetics and imagery are used as the backdrop for the switch because of the extremely patriarchal society associated with this era. Gender roles were very clear during that generation. Men had the power and were strong and in charge, while women were subservient to them and only held supportive roles in their lives, at the office or at home. The intent of these posters is for the viewer to explore how media has defined the gender roles and performances we still follow today. I chose the performances where gender can clearly be seen, such as their treatment of children's toys, beauty perceptions, self-care, and household duties. And I'll give you a little close-up of each one. So this first one, G.I. Joe, is what I named it. What's important in this one is it's obviously advertising the G.I. Joe doll, but the language is what's key. G.I. Joe is described as a doll. He is pretty. He can have his own embroidered canteen, and you can have a matching one too. You can buy many outfits and accessories. You can even color, cut, and style his beard, just like you would, obviously, a Barbie doll. This one, the beauty buff, this poster highlights the fact that women have to perform and make themselves desired by men. The model is given a very soft look. He is lovely and trying to get lovelier so that women can desire him. Along the beauty as well. This one is the Add a Pound commercial. This really hit home for me because it is an ad that sexualizes the male body like you normally see the women's body by promoting a larger certain body part. The man is put on display while the woman is the voyeur and carries the gaze, making the man the object of desire. Moon Drops is a face moisturizer advertisement promoting self-care, which we seldom see for men. Similar to a traditional advertisement using a female model, he is topless, in the middle of the forest for no apparent reason. Racing his face, and advertising face moisturizer that would help him stay young. And finally, probably my favorite one, the vacuum cleaner. This poster also hit home for me in the because it is about the distribution of house duties. We have come a long way since the 1950s on that topic, but I still feel like women are represented as running the household and manage house duties such as cleaning. This ad happens to be during Christmas, telling women to buy their husband the best Christmas present there is, a vacuum cleaner, so it can make their job of keeping the house up easier and better because he deserves it. And that's it for this one.
Okay, so I have a question.
Sure.
The artwork that you have here, I didn't understand, was it sourced, is it something that you made or you studied?
I made.
Okay, and the source that you, the pieces that you pulled together, how did you do some of that? Can you talk to that?
I mean, all of it is basically done in Photoshop as far as the software, but it's, I hunted down in thrift store old magazines from the era, and either scanned or took pictures, and then made up for some of the other parts with stock photography or things I found online that I could manipulate.
So for instance, the man holding the vacuum cleaner, what was that originally?
Actually, that one's really fun. The original picture, that one is probably the one I had to do the most work with. He actually was, it's a stock photography image from obviously that era. He was from the 50s or 60s, but he was actually posing like this, but holding a watering can. I don't really know why, but the angle was good for what I was trying to accomplish. And I found the vacuum as a stock photography as well. So I just pieced it together, basically, and just added the cord so it looked like that's what he was doing. And actually, the vacuum itself originally was straight up, like, you know, just sitting there. So I, like, angled it so it looked like he was there.
Well, it comes together well enough that
You can't say
I was
that.
very surprised.
That was the goal, was that it would look legitimate so that you actually wonder, like, is that really in that? So that was the goal, yeah. And all of them, I mean, are like that. So I found one, again, from an old magazine around that same era. So it was I think it's Revlon. It was a brand, the original brand. And so it was a woman doing that, just holding her face for no reason in the forest. And so I just put a man instead. It just helped her do that.
Jamie, do you have a question?
Well, I was curious that the man looking back over his shoulder, that was the one that, yeah. So for your Photoshop, like, did you actually merge male and female faces on that one, or did you?
That was a model. The only thing I really did on him is the way I added like a rosy cheeks and his lips a little bit.
Are they glossed a little bit?
Yeah, I was say, can I try but I think you'd be able to see the sort of pink.
Yeah, there's a little bit more because I wanted like very like soft and cute, if you will. Also, the original picture actually on that one, I think he was wearing a suit.
Sorry, it's getting
So I had
dark.
to find I did find a stock,
Oh, I see.
another
You see the
stock.
like
I see
pink
the
blushing? Yeah, so that's it.
Stock image of another man that was in a similar angle, but like a modern image where he had a t-shirt, so I could make it a little bit more casual, and he's just, you know.
I actually thought that was a woman at first. It took me a minute.
Yeah.
to catch
But a
up.
lot of the wording is really where, you know, the comments obviously are, I mean, the imagery as well, but, you know, just like the G.I. Joe, if you really read in there, that's where I really try to put language that you normally would see in a doll advertisement. And why not G.I. Joe? That's because Hansel and Gretel.
Because they're action figures.
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
No, no.
Yeah, I don't think you bragged enough on how you did this because it all looks so
Yeah.
polished.
So
Yes.
for him, that was obviously a real G.I. Joe. So it was mainly in the wording. I did add the canteens. That was photoshopped in and I engraved. Yeah. Or embroidered, I should say. He might be.
Yeah.
And you can, that's what it says, don't wait, now today to order your very own custom embroidered canteen with your initials matched with your doll.
That's great.
I can be your best friend. Which that's also a very Barbie thing. And that one was fun.
Yeah.
That one, the main thing I think I'm trying to remember, I think in particular that one, I found that picture of that guy and I was like, I have to use this somehow. And I mean, I did enhance the button a little bit, but not too much.
And it was really based on another, like a real ad where.
A real ad that was advertising, take the out-of-town peel back in the 50s, 60s, you can see the package, so it was a real commercial or ad in a magazine, but it was also for women saying, I guess they were going through a stage of they didn't want skinny women anymore. The trend was little, meatier women, and so it was saying, take those because usually wear bathing suits, and it would say, now that I've been taking this pill, man, look at me and like me more because I put on a pant. So that was a comment, but I didn't have one yet. And that one's actually two men. I found the guy, but then he again had a suit. A lot of the stock imagery you can find for the 50s, 60s, they were usually all dressed up, so it doesn't really work. So I found another image of a different man, but from from today, that was topless doing that. So I just kind of photoshopped that part onto that face, and then added the leaves, and then the two-tone, or I guess it's three-tone colors. It's very much from that era as well.
Are there other questions or comments for our speaker?
No, I would just make the comment that it's so interesting that so many of these ads are still around today. That you looked at old
Yes.
magazines, but I've seen ads like this,
Oh, yeah.
more recent.
Perfumes do that a lot
Yes.
as well. And that one was also the fact that really there's not a lot of, you rarely, if ever, see advertising for like a man's moisturizer. That's just not even a thing you see. When researching the vacuum cleaner, because I was like, well, I just want to make sure, there are a few I've noticed that started advertising, putting men in their commercials and their advertisements for vacuum cleaners. I think, looked up, because I tried to do, or I was thinking of doing one for child raising and that kind of thing, and there was Pampers have started putting men changing the diaper, or playing with the baby, I guess it is usually, advertising diapers. I was impressed, but it's only like a handful for sure, not many.
I don't know if this was the aim of the project, so I apologize if my question is beyond scope.
Sure.
But very lovely stuff. I've seen similar things to this, and I kind of thought it was that, but then when you said it was yours, I was like, wow, yes, I agree with David Thornton. They're very impressive. I like them. But I have seen similar things like that, and so I was wondering, in terms of gender performance, because I know, and I could get the definition that you gave wrong, but basically it's societal expectation placed on one or the other gender, right? So is there a combative approach to change that expectation, or through obviously satirical and somewhat serious
Sure.
stuff like this, but is there also other aims and approaches to combat this sort of thing?
Other ways, you mean, to do it?
Sure, yeah.
Well, I would think, just like I was saying, the Pampers ones that I found online, for instance, or I guess in magazines, more and more they're starting to go males into what you would expect would be a female performance. And the more you see it, the more it becomes a norm. So it's not
Okay,
such as shocking, same TV commercials and that type of thing. So
okay. Okay.
we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're getting close to time where she got to do her next presentation, which is maybe following this. So if you don't mind, just go ahead and start at the next
Okay.
bit.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, sorry.
Well, it's kind of part question and part comment. This is a little bit outside the scope of your presentation. We're talking about stereotypical gender roles and expectations. If you go back and look at some of the, not ads, but posters from World War I, and particularly World War II, you do have women largely because of the graph, but women cast into what had been male roles. And the images depict that. pretty
I actually
clearly.
found a lot when I was trying to find stock photography, a lot, because I was trying to at first I even thought of doing, instead of men doing female performances, I was thinking of maybe mixing it up and have some female doing male things. I scratched that idea because I just got kind of stuck, but I found a lot of imagery from that era where they're like working on airplanes and building, guns and bullets and
Rosie
things.
the Riveter.
Yep. So it was really interesting. So this project was created while I was in a class last spring with Professor Anderson, and it was a design studio. And the way the design studio is set up is very open-ended as far as the projects, and you can kind of basically pick what you want to push, and depending on what your goals are, maybe after graduation and thesis purposes. And this was one of the ones, we did 3 that semester, but this was definitely my biggest one. How UI/UX principles can be applied to non-traditional projects in an academic-centered environment. So why escape rooms? I have always enjoyed escape rooms, the challenge of getting out of a room within a set amount of time, using common sense while solving riddles and puzzles. Teamed up with friends or strangers with only one goal, getting out. What makes it so attractive? Is it just the challenge of it all? I'm highly competitive. Could that explain my interest? What does a successful room depend on? I've narrowed it down to the following key elements. A storyline, an immersive experience, as in the design of the room, the feel, the look. The difficulty level, you don't want it too hard, but you don't want it too simple either. And the number of puzzles, challenges, and riddles, as well as how clever they are and how they work together within your theme. So how does this apply to UI/UX centered design? By definition, UI refers to user interface. In other words, the design, the look, and the feel of a project. While UX, user experience, refers to user-centered design, using principles of human interaction with a product, an event, or a space. These principles were a perfect match for an escape room design and setup, from concept to branding, creation, setup, and even user testing. With this in mind, I set some guidelines and created a plan for my project. Concept would be an escape room, obviously, through a series of sequential props, mind games, puzzles, and locks. You must get out of the room within a limited amount of time. The audience for this project would be anyone 12 to 100 years old. No specific knowledge or skills will be required to make it through. That was important in deciding on tasks they would need to escape. I did not want anyone with specific knowledge to have an advantage. Common sense was key. The timeline, which included research, conceptual outputs, props, room setup, as well as testing, were to be completed within the availability of the gallery. From beginning to end, the project would take approximately 2 months. User experience elements. I would strategize the design of the experience I want the audience to have, the flow of the room, and how each element led to the next. I wanted the audience to be challenged, but also to have fun through a storytelling and immersive experience. User interface elements. Physically design the look and feel of the room, the decor, the props, the lighting. The escape room would be set up in the art department student gallery. This step also included branding and logo. And finally, findings. Through my own visual analysis and participant surveys, I would summarize the results of the experiment. Was the room successful? Did my UI/UX principles work and help? What could be improved? Could this process be applied to other areas of design, teaching, teaching, and visual communication? So for my research and planning phase, I researched quite a bit and realized pretty quickly that one of the most important steps in this process was to come up with a good storyline. One that made sense to the users and made the experience seamless. The decor, the challenges, the puzzles, and end goal needed to work together with a common thread in order to make it successful. The storyline that I came up with was given to each team before they started the hour they were given, and this was the story. Your roommate Joe had a family emergency and had to leave campus before turning his final thesis paper, which he left on a flash drive in his office. He asked you to help him out and go set it for him with only 1 hour left before the deadline. You agreed to help out and go into his office, but you can't remember where he said he put it or what his computer login password is. He left clues all around his office in case he forgot himself. Can you find out your roommate's clues, find the flash drive, and unlock his computer? You have 1 hour before the deadline. This is crisis hour. Good luck. And this is where crisis hour was born. The next step was to work on my UX elements, deciding on what challenges the audience would have to work with, how many, what order, and making sure they work together for a common goal. As previously explained, the goal of the room was to find a flash drive, unlock a computer, and send a thesis paper within the hour, providing me with the perfect path-based workflow for the room. Find the drive, unlock the computer, email within the hour, and you win. Through research and my previous escape room experiences, I developed a list of challenges I believed could work with a storyline and space. I wanted to make sure I had items with different difficulty levels and also include some that required other items to be figured out before you could solve them. Each team would have to find letters through the room while unlocking different cases, boxes, and drawers to make up a password to unlock the computer. The flash drive was also hidden, which was required to complete the game. This was probably the most time-consuming part of this project, but once completed, everything fell into place. It required a few adjustments once I decided how many I needed to fit my time frame, as when I started purchasing props and other items for the room. The end product was my mastermind map, as you can see on the left, showing all puzzles and elements of the room, as well as how they interacted with each other. This also became my main support when I'm interacting with teams for clues, as well as resetting the room after each session. The UX part of this project was now complete. For the room, I was able to utilize the student gallery. I still need to fill it up with, to make sure my experience was complete and as immersive as possible. I had my mind map and a list of puzzles and props to work with, and needed to set up furniture and other items to make it as realistic as possible. Setup took a full day to complete, but the final output was better than I even hoped for, making my room feel complete and realistic. After some hurdles with technology, I set up a flat screen TV in order to show a countdown, as well as 2 laptops, one in the room, the other in the control room, while on the Skype video call, so that I could view each team and provide clues as needed. The UI part of this project was now complete as well. Now that the room was set up and puzzles in place, I needed to test them, just as you would test an app or a website. My biggest worries included not having enough challenges to last an hour, the room being too easy or too difficult to complete, the puzzles not flowing with the storyline, or the timer and Skype calls not working, which would present me with communicating with participants. Over the course of a day before the grand opening, I had 3 different groups test the room, because you can never test out a product or project too many times. findings of my testings were that the timer and Skype calls actually worked perfectly, which was my biggest worry. All teams needed clues to complete the room, leading me to believe that it was hard enough, but all were able to finish. Clues and puzzles worked well. I did decide to make a couple of them slightly easier and a couple of them slightly harder. Passwords seemed hard to find, so I added a couple elements to help that as well. And everyone had a very hard time finding the flash drive and needed a clue to unlock the computer prior to that, thinking, okay, if I unlock the computer, I'm done and I win, which was not the case. So I ended up having to add wording to the computer, making it clear that without the drive, they're not done. And I would have never figured that out, obviously, without testing. So for the final product, and after making those few adjustments, the room actually opened a schedule. And over the course of 2 weeks, I supervised several other groups of different sizes and ages, some from other departments, friends, family, making little to no adjustments to the setup. All teams successfully completed the experience with similar timing and seemed to have a great time. Some of my findings were surprising, and UX related. How each group reacted in certain situations. Some reacted as I would expect at finding simpler puzzles and riddles first, while struggling with the harder ones. But others did the opposite and figured out the harder puzzles right away, which made me very worried. Well, they're done. But then they would get stuck on the easiest ones. Bigger groups had a harder time finding their way up as personalities collided or didn't work as well together. The most successful teams contained active and vocal members, which helped move forward, while more quiet persons kept to themselves, slowing down the process. The biggest common thread among groups was the tendency to overthink and try too hard at solving puzzles, when almost all were easily figured out. This was definitely something I expected, but not to that degree. And as you can see from some of these numbers, you can see the average time and how many teams. And the bottom questions were mainly from the surveys that I gave them after each. In conclusion, creating an escape room from scratch allowed me to utilize and expand my UI/UX skills and knowledge. It made me realize that those principles could be applied to any platform or setup and did not have to be limited to web or app design. It could become a great teaching tool and even expanded to larger projects with different collaborating teams. In essence, developing a UI/UX learning and teaching environment which could be easily translated into the business world.
We have time for 1 or 2 questions.
Sorry, that one was a little longer.
What class is this one?
A design studio, which is very open-ended. You can pretty much do whatever you want. It became its own animal. Yeah, I'm sorry.
So, I was saying this one. So in,
Yes.
so in creating clues, what did you find was the more difficult task of trying to come up with the various clues and their creation? I think did you have one that was particularly hard for you to design and create, or was it just tweak more than the others?
No, not really. I mean, I had certain ideas from doing maybe myself before, then of course doing some research and some ideas. The biggest elements were I didn't want it too hard or too easy, so that's always kind of like that. But also, I had the funds that I had, so it was a lot of thrift shop and, go from plan A to plan B when I would, well, no, that's not going to work. I can't find this one thing I was hoping to do, so I'll just go to plan B and find this book, The funnest one that really, I think, literally every single team got stuck on, which I would assume is one of the easier, is the shelves. I don't know if you can go back to the, it's hard to see, but there's a shelf that had a bunch of books, notebooks, as if it was a dorm room. And I had one of those books with a cutout secret compartment with a key in it. Every single team, it took them forever to find it. They would flip through a couple of the books, but because it was the last one, they would never get to it, or they would skip it. And so, to me, I was just like, watching them on the other end, you're just like, it's right there. And without that key, you can open that other thing, so they kept like, getting stuck. Yeah, so it was a lot of tweaking, but, and then I was very worried. I was like, did I do it right? So then, can they really like follow through? So yeah, but again, testing.
Okay, so we're out of time because we got the meeting coming up next, so let's thank our speaker again.
Thanks.